Hello again, and welcome to Race and Ethnicity. So this week we're in week 5. Okay, it's going to be an awesome week. You guys are going to be looking at the history of race. It's an incredible topic. This is what really got me into sociology in the first place. I have degrees in psychology and history, but when I started studying race and social class and how those link, it definitely gave me the sociological perspective. And here I am, many years later, teaching sociology, along with I do still teach psychology and things, and would teach history if I could, because this is fascinating. All right, so to really attack this, though, we need to know a little bit about the history of race, okay? And so where does race really come from? So you got to think, for a long time, Europeans had already been warring. So this idea of conquering and England going over to Scotland and making it part of theirs, this was not a new concept. So when England came over and colonized the North America with the French, and then Spain went down south to Latin America, this was totally a normal European stance. It's just the age of colonialism. It's the age of European expansion and Europeans conquering the planet, okay? So again, if you guys look at your map and you kind of look on like Google Earth, look at how small Europe is compared to Africa and other places in the world. It kind of is shocking that such a small territory was able to take over the planet. But again, they did this with guns and germs, okay? And so here we are in modern America, and to understand modern America, we have to understand the history of America. So again, England comes over, they conquer the United States, okay, and then Europe sets up a class system where anyone that was from Europe and they were able to have privilege. They were able to get elite jobs, they were able to have access, they were able to compete, okay? And then women and all non-Europeans were excluded from competing. So this idea of race comes about through social class. You had the haves and the have-nots, those with property and those without property. Europeans wanted to make sure that they were the ones who dominated the social system, so therefore they created race. And the very first races were white and non-white. Okay, European and non-European. Okay, so race was constructed so could have very clearly defined social classes. You were allowed to be in the upper class if you were white, and if you weren't white, you were stuck in the lower classes and you weren't given access. Okay, and so that's where the history of race comes from. That's the origin of race. It's actually about economics. It's the goal of the Europeans to maintain their power, to maintain their privilege, okay, and then to oppress other groups to ensure that they couldn't compete for precious resources, to compete to be part of the upper class, okay? So that's the idea when you're looking at history of race, okay? Where does race come from? It comes from class conflict. It comes from one group trying to dominate another group. The idea of race being a social construction, again, this is the idea that race in itself, there's no biological basis. So somebody that identifies as white in the United States has more in common with someone in Africa than they do their next door neighbor who might also have light skin. So these are the things you need to be thinking about, okay? So for this week, you're going to get pretty deep into this idea of the history of race. You're going to cover colonialism, get more into what the social construction of race means. So the very first thing you guys are going to do is this assignment, the history of race, okay? So for this, you're going to read this great article here by Smedley and by Rogers and Bowman. And then there's some incredible three-part series the BBC does on the history of race. And then also this, A Story of Race, okay? This will give you a really good detailed understanding of where race comes from. And now I recommend, as you're kind of watching this video, is to start writing out some of these key points. When you hear something interesting, kind of pause it, write, because you need to do a 600-word paper that talks about issues facing minorities in the U.S., okay? So what are the issues faced by Jewish people and Africans and Native Americans and Asian Americans and Pacific Islander Americans and Latin Americans, okay? So, you can just look at all the different groups. You can focus on one group, okay? And then you want to kind of look at power, privilege, and oppression. How did Europeans or how did the white people in the United States, enforce their privilege and power, and how do they maintain oppression over other groups so they can maintain their privilege and power, okay? So that's what you're going to be thinking about. So as you're reading through all these papers and as you're watching these videos, just start working on your 600-word paper, okay? I mean, that's only like a page and a half. So really think about the things that you found the most interesting regarding the statuses and issues facing non-dominant races in American history, okay? Then you're going to choose one time period you learned about, and that's what you're going to write your paper on. So just kind of find a sect, look at a time period, and you can see there's pretty general periods here. What was happening between 1500 and 1865. Primarily, you had Europeans coming over and some slaves. 1866 to 1945, you started to see some Asians come over and Southern Europeans. And then after 1945, really after 1960, you start to see Latin Americans and Asians coming over. So if you kind of looked at like the waves of immigration, that's the way that focuses on. So there's some really interesting stuff here for you guys. It's pretty general. Do some creative writing. So that's going to be your first assignment. And then your second assignment is to take The Inquisitive over Chapter 2, The Invention of Race. And I love your textbook. It's the best. So again, you guys can look at your textbook too to kind of use it for this if you need to. But your textbook is so well written. If you want to learn about race and ethnicity, it's just an incredible book. So please read the entire chapter because it's that awesome. And then take The Inquisitive over that. Again, if you guys have questions, let me know. And, just email me, text me, call me, whatever's best for you. If you have any questions, have a great day. Just holler. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.